For today's video, I'll be trying Crusader Kings 3 by Paradox. I've never played these games, but I've absorbed a lot of information about them through a process known as cultural osmosis. From what I've gathered, Crusader Kings is a game about your reign as a great ruler, securing your right to rule through any means necessary, and conquering Europe if you find the time. And just as the good Lord intended, your king is a peak specimen, the epitome of the greatness that humanity has to offer.
Ill, pneumonia, lover's pox, leper, one-eyed, one-legged, hideous, imbecile, fornicator.
So, as you can see, clearly I'm already an expert at this game, in every aspect. While managing a delicate balance of resources and land, you'll also be balancing relationships, managing plagues, and using blackmail to force people to pay more taxes. All of this is done in the pursuit of conquest and letting everyone know just how great you are. And if that doesn't work, you can always try a more hands-on approach for teaching the importance of teamwork. Like any pro gamer, I started with the tutorial. I was a petty king in Ireland, King Murchad McDonchad. I didn't choose his name, that's what Paradox decided he needed to be called. And I can understand why. Look at that glorious beard, that wide nose, and that furious come-hither stare. Absolute alpha male presentation if I've ever seen it. Since King Murchad was from my ancestral home of Ireland, he was a pagan idol worshipper who can only barely be considered civilized. Reflecting this was his great skills in violence and impatience. Traits he had in abundance. Traits he, my dad, my grandfather, and pretty much everyone I'm blood related to have in common. And he had an heir, Brian McMurchad Brian. Brian? Your name is stupid. The game explained several important mechanics and details to me, which, I'm not gonna lie, I was not smart enough to absorb. Luckily, Crusader Kings 3 has a built-in wiki of sorts to help smooth-brained Celts like myself play grand strategy games. So, in the interest of time, let's have a quick speed round of the adventures of King Donchad in the game's early stages. I married him off to a lovely woman named Ximena Nunez. Her cousin, King Alfonso of Leon, thanked me for taking her away and decided to become my new BFF. And looking at that 1,000-yard stare she has, I don't blame him. That's a face that's seen some untold horrors, and goddammit, she's going to make sure you hear about every single one of them. Ximena was an empath who was compassionate, lazy, lustful, and terrible with money. A perfect match for a man like King Murchad McDonchad. And speaking of good company, I got to meet my ever-loyal council. Most importantly, I was introduced to Thomas Johansson, my bishop. To put it bluntly, he didn't like me. So I began forming plots and conspiracies to earn his friendship. Through the careful application of scheming and underhandedness, I was going to befriend His Holiness, whether he liked it or not. I also got to make my first difficult choice as king. A man was accosted in my streets for the crime of being Swedish. My bishop, who suffered from the very same terminal condition, asked me to say nice things about his country to make my people like them more. I politely declined. Yeah, fuck the Swedes. Soon after, I came to the horrific realization that a great illness was tearing through a nearby earldom. A new disease known as King AIDS flu. Really? Okay. A new disease known as King AIDS flu was making the disgusting peasants somehow even more repugnant and sticky. I immediately called the court physician only to realize I didn't have one. My choices were an okay grad student who wanted 5% of my gold, or Damon, a dropout who looked like he was concealing a fart. The commoners already smelled bad enough. I didn't need my doctor bringing that stink in with him. Rather than cripple the economy or start purging our villages to stop the spread of the plague, I took a gentle, more compassionate approach to protecting my people. Humanity and empathy would be the tools I used to help my fellow man and keep them safe from the dangers of the world. And then I invaded my next-door neighbor for the crime of having something that I wanted. His entire county. Halfway through my righteous campaign, I caught tuberculosis, but luckily Astolf was there to force-feed me pregnant pig urine. It turns out this is extremely effective at stopping a disease that had a 66% mortality rate at its peak. They don't make doctors like Astolf anymore. Truly the man was worth the 50 crowns I spent on him. Excellent work, Astolf. It was so effective that when Zamina saw the non-vegan lemonade King Don Chad was choking down, she caught the consumption for a chance at getting a sip too. Somehow in the process, he ended up stabbing her repeatedly. These things happen. I get it, bro. Medicine is hard. Ain't that right, Brian? Due to the earlier misfortune, a new queen had to be chosen, Baroness Giselle. As it turns out, King Merchad McDonchad is so much of an alpha male that he was able to impregnate her from an entirely different landmass. At least, that's what Giselle told him. Maybe I nutted into a sock and then just had it postmated over to her. And I can't think of any reason someone would lie about a thing like that. And so, Forbflaith Nick Merchad Brian was born, and apparently she wasn't as excited as everyone else about it. Peace reigned in my kingdom for a year, but things were due to change. Merchad McDonchad had reached the venerable age of 43. Look what 4 years of being king does to a man. Sensing that his end was coming, King Donchad declared war with Earl Donchad, then died immediately after so he wouldn't have to live with the consequences of it. But don't worry, Forbflaith may have only been 0 years old, but she was ambitious and ready to lead her people. She'd already mastered many skills and was sure to be admired by her subjects. As queen, Forbflaith's first act was to adopt a stray puppy, then admonish the King of England for becoming English. Her first challenge as queen at the age of 4 was to manage the outbreak of yet another plague. So, the decision was made to tell everyone to go to their room for 7 months. At the age of 5, she heard of a group of heretics who thought the plague was the mark of the end times. This was complete blasphemy. Anyone caught saying the plague was going to kill them was to be rounded up and burned at the stake. My subjects, enlightened beacons of humanity that they are, apparently thought this was hilarious. Children truly are the future. We fast forward a couple of years to July 1077. I adopted a cat in celebration of my kingdom's rightful expansion. In this game, you can invade your neighbors for the pettiest of reasons and take their land in the process. And while this is no doubt one of the finest perks of royalty, the role of a queen is one with several downsides. Apparently, if you're a smooth-brained child who has never left her home city, you're not smart enough to plot or scheme against people. You also have unlimited power, but you still have to have a grown-up help run your kingdom, even if he absolutely hates you. And because I'm not very good at handling my money, I'm not influential enough yet to tax my new vassals anything more than the bottom rate. I was taking in new leadership and subjects who I was paying to keep alive while making almost no money from them, spiraling my kingdom ever closer to bankruptcy. And also, my cat was kind of an asshole. These were the kind of struggles that grown-ups had to deal with. How was a literal child supposed to cope instead of seethe and or mauled at the situation? By using her neighbor's declaration of war as an excuse to take literally everything he owned. Petty King Tagged wrote me an angry letter, wishing rotten humors upon my body and telling me that he thought I was dumb and that he deserved my land. What followed was the strangest game of chicken and mouse an NPC has ever put me through. I'm new to this, so I don't know if this is some sort of grand strategy to sow confusion and mayhem among my ranks. In theory, it was a fresh, original idea. In practice, I now own 50% of Ireland. But for some reason, I decided to let him keep his county. I don't know what that's about. To celebrate my victory over my fellow Irishmen, Forbflaith became an adult and she got married. She also was called a tyrant for asking a vassal to pay the normal amount of taxes. But there was even more good news. Forbflaith proudly announced she was pregnant. Her husband could hardly contain his excitement. Look at that proud soon-to-be father. It turns out my queen was biologically related to her husband, so I exiled him, and I gave the inbred little bundle of joy to some king in England. They keep offering to give her back. I'm good. So instead, I married the king who tried to invade me earlier. His wife seemed fine with it, which left me to think all was well with the kingdom. Until the king betrayed me for a second time by dying and giving my queen yet another level of stress. And that was fine, because the most jovial of times were upon us. By decree of His Holiness, the Pope something rather, war for the Promised Land had been declared. As a devout Catholic, my queen did what any of the faithful would do. gave the Vatican some pocket change, and wished them the best of luck. It went great. Look how awkwardly the Pope is just standing there. The absolute disappointment. He looks like the Caliph just got done scolding him. At this point, I realized I didn't know when I was going to stop recording or when I should stop the video. Crusader Kings is a game with playthroughs that can span hundreds of hours. I don't got that kind of time. So instead, I decided making Forbflaith cut her face off to prevent leprosy was probably a decent conclusion. I really like this game. It's too bad my attention span isn't strong enough to give it a better shake, but I would definitely recommend it. And I'm definitely going to revisit it, but for now, I think this is a good place to leave off. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. If you really want to help back what I do, a link to my Patreon is down below. A huge thanks to my backers and supporters on Patreon. You truly are the taxpayers that keep this county up and running. More content on the way, so stay tuned. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all next time.